Why working on prevention is so hard for some of us, and I'm talking about health here, obviously. Why is it so hard for us to ditch old habits, distractions, and do what we need to do in order to get healthier and live a better life right at the end? And what you're going to hear today from our guest, Vik Vasishta from Leica Health, is this. You're going to hear this several times. That it's not one size fits all. And a lot of the time we are looking on social medias at what all these other people are doing. They're living fabulous lives and they are doing all this exercise, eating fantastic food, and they're super healthy because of that. And we really don't know half of what's going on with them, but we often fail to then do those things as well because they just don't suit our lifestyle or even our personalities. So if you are interested in finding out more how to work on your prevention, if you're around your 30s, 40s, 50s, and if you're a little bit stuck, you feel like you're putting on weight a little bit too much, you're starting to feel those changes, you're feeling stiff, you feel a little bit weak, you're getting out of breath when you go up the stairs, today's episode is for you. Hi, I'm Bruno de Jongh, and this is the Wellness Shift podcast where we are interviewing different providers. We interview some of our clients and some of our physiotherapists and osteopaths here at CBR Clinics, just to try and get some insights for you, the listener, and the viewer on how to improve your life overall. We cover several different topics from mental health to physical health, and hopefully there's always something here for you.
This episode is sponsored by Mousetrapper, one of the lead ergonomic mouse companies in Europe. Most of us spend hours at a computer, often in static positions our bodies aren't built for. That's why so many people feel pain in the neck, shoulders, and arms, often caused by one simple thing: reaching out to the side for a traditional mouse. Mousetrapper solves this by placing the mouse centrally in front of the keyboard. This keeps your arms close, your shoulders aligned, and your posture neutral, reducing the muscle strain that leads to repetitive injuries. Instead of moving a mouse across the desk, you control everything with the mesh-like control pad or smooth carbon fiber roller bar. Both allow precise, low-effort movement using small, relaxed motions, which is exactly what good ergonomics encourages. They design and manufacture Mousetrap in Sweden with a focus on long product life and sustainability. Durable products mean less waste and fewer replacements over time. If you never tried a sensor mouse before, the difference is immediate. That's why they offer a free 14-day trial so you can feel the improvement for yourself. Fight the pain, support healthy posture, experience Mousetrapper.
So, Vic, welcome back to the Wellness Shift podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking more about prevention and why prevention is more important than acting when things are already set, when chronic disease is already there, or excruciating pain and all of that. So just to get us started, Vic, why do you think that prevention is better than cure, and why is it so important?
It's a great question, a great initial question, and I think it introduces the concept well. I think in years gone by, particularly in medicine, we've been very reactive to conditions. We develop cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure in later years, and the focus is very much on how do we treat those conditions, because the emphasis on why they may have occurred years before was ignored at the time. Whereas now the mindset is much more along the lines of leading happier, healthier, more active lifestyles in our younger years. And we've seen a correlation to an improvement in all-cause mortality for a lot of these big diseases. And the link has now been made that if we are doing more at a younger age, we can actually prevent or delay the onset of those nasty diseases later on in life. So I think it's a mindset change, which has prompted a improvement in the disease burden in later stages.
So why are some people still not doing it? Like we all know is like exercise, eat well, have good sleep, do some self-care. Why some people are still not doing that?
I think a lot of it comes down to the root issue, which is it's not a one size fits all. You've listed a whole bunch of different things that people can do there. Firstly, if someone tried to do all of those things simultaneously at the same time, they'd probably fall down because they start to find their life miserable. It comes down to an understanding of what can work well within your daily routine, what can allow you to still function in the way that you want to as a human being in society, but also allow you to still enjoy life. So when you understand, what would work well for you, it's about then incorporating that into your daily routine. And then the second part to it is it takes at least 6 weeks of doing something before something becomes a habit. Like, if you want to cut sugar from your coffee, for example, you got to go through 6 miserable weeks of bitter tasting coffee before you come out the other side and say, well, actually, this is quite nice. It's people sticking with it for 6 weeks it's a hard undertaking.
That's the hard part, isn't it? And I think there's lots of ways of doing these days, right? There's apps that will track what you're doing. You can put the old-fashioned post-it notes, or you can write in the journal, I've done it today. But people really struggle, I think, to find sometimes the starting point, like you said, or what's going to work for them.
Yeah, it's like January. January, there's going to be no booze, there's going to be no meat, there's going to be gym every day. It's not sustainable. No. By January 31st, everyone's like, right, get me a pint, get me a burger, get me out the gym, because it's too much happening at one stage. That's what I've seen in my experiences.
Yeah. And do you think that do you think people fall off the wagon and sort of they get started and then they fall off the wagon and they have a hard time going back into it? Why is that? Is it because there's too much overwhelming information out there? There's too much, too many distractions on apps, and, people binge on Netflix, and they really struggle to almost feel like there's so much information, there's so much distraction out there these days. It's so easy to just not do it.
Yeah, I think it stems from a slight bit of one size fits all. People are, I take the Christmas example because it's the one that's probably most apparent to a large group of people. You're sitting there, it's Boxing Day, you've overindulged, you're thinking, I want to get healthy. You just have to go on social media and you'll see, new year, new you. I think we're guilty of using that here as a slogan, but you then see a whole bunch of different ways to do that. No alcohol, vegan January, get in the gym. And the focus for a lot of those particular kind of activities are a month long. So you're already training your mind to, I'm only doing this for a month. And I guess you see the 31st of January, you see the end of January as goal tick.
A milestone.
You reach that target. Whereas in actual fact, we're looking for not wholesale changes, but changes in keeping with what your current needs are that are actually sustainable. And I think that's where people, myself included, that's where you kind of come cropper. Yeah. Is wholesale changes.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And from your experience being a GP, what do you say is the biggest behavior people struggle to change?
I think that the combination of diet and exercise is often a very difficult one to combine. They're both got very important needs, but for very different reasons. And what you'll find is that people want to cut back on everything that they shouldn't be having. They'll get themselves in the gym. They'll start burning much more than they're used to burning. And then in turn, they don't want to reward themselves with a salad. They want to have something which is more carb heavy. So a combination of those two things at the same time can often prove quite difficult. And people end up relaxing on at least one of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm guilty of that actually, because I have been really good with my exercise routine recently, but I will indulge a bit more because I'm working out. So could eat that extra piece of chocolate or whatever. It's terrible, isn't it? And do you think that, I know you're a private GP, do you work in the NHS as well?
Yeah, I work in the NHS every week as well.
So you've got those two experiences, right, of being a private GP and the NHS GP. Do you think that, and we all know that NHS is overloaded, all that stuff that's been going on for decades now. Do you think that the NHS GPs, they actually are set up to prevent problems or just be more reactive?
I think the difference between the two markets is very much consumerese. When you walk into a private health centre such as this, it's all set up and ready to go. pick, I want to have a preventative health screen. You can have your blood tests, you can have your face-to-face with the GP, be examined, maybe have some additional tests, and then someone's going to comprehensively go through the results with you and explain thereafter what it is that you need to do. Which is very easy, wrapped up nicely. Whereas in the NHS, those same things are still available, but it takes a lot more onus on the individual to both be accountable for their own time, but also their own records. So, for example, it's very possible to do a lot of what happens in the private sector in the NHS. Once a year, you'd have to call up, say, I want to have some blood tests done. I want to have my fasting cholesterol, my HbA1c for diabetes. I want to have a blood pressure check. If I'm over the age of 50, I want to have the cancer stool screening test. And if I'm over the age of 40, I want to have a PSA. Have all those tests done, get the results. If there's any abnormalities, it will automatically trigger an appointment. But if they're normal, be able to file them and compare them year on year. So you can still achieve the same thing. It just requires a lot more onus on the individual.
I see. So on the private health, there's a lot more. Well, it's a bit more hand holding, and it's sort of they just get right. Let's just get all this done right now, much faster. But the NHS have to plan weeks and weeks, maybe months ahead.
There's more onus on the individual. Of course, we're talking in generalizations here.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that I don't show any favoritism as to how I treat the individual, depending on which forum they come in to see me. I know if I'm requesting blood tests for somebody for something else within the NHS, I will look, when did they last have a PSA? When did they last have a fasting cholesterol taken? And if they're due them, I'll ask them, can we do these tests? A lot depends on the individual that you see, but I would say the younger generation of GPs are more attuned and switched on to the need for preventative healthcare.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. What do you think are the most preventable conditions that you see every week or every month?
I would say you can, broadly speaking, put them into two separate categories, both equally as important as each other in terms of longevity. On one side, you have your kind of physiological conditions. So I'd put in there diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and then cardiovascular disease. So that's one side. On the other side, I would have your mechanical related conditions. So back pain, hip pain, leg pain, all of which are due to a lack of strength training, strength and conditioning. And if you don't work that side, it can have just as grave impacts as the other side can in terms of your overall longevity. For example, I think over the age of 70, you can see on a bell-shaped curve that your all-cause mortality risk from falls just goes through the roof. And that ends up being one of the greatest risk factors to dying prematurely, is actually that you're going to have a fall. So strength training is just as important. So I say you can broadly put them into two boxes.
Yeah. So what do you think that patients ignore for too long? What is it what are the early signs that might give them a clue? Look, you gotta do a little bit more exercise. What is it that people, even maybe in the 30s, might be a bit early, but certainly people in the 40s and 50s, they will notice things that will give them signs. Maybe I need to do something about this.
So I think 30s, we can definitely talk about 30s. I think there's a lot of things that people can be doing in their 30s that can have an impact on what they do. But the physical signs are slightly less because your body has an incredible ability to compensate and buffer for these things. But in your 40s, you might start to notice from a cardiovascular standpoint, you might start to notice you put on some weight. You know, there's some stubborn belly fat, you just can't shift. You waist 32 as a man, you know, your entire life, and suddenly you're not. That might be one thing you start to notice. Again, from male health, you might start to notice that, you know, I'm not peeing quite as well as I used to. It used to be a nice steady stream. It's now more kind of on, off. Start to get up a few times in the night. Don't remember this happening. From a female health standpoint, might start to just be a bit more fatigued than normal. Why am I'm tired and earlier in the morning. Might start to get some dark patches on your skin. Skin doesn't look as clean and healthy as it used to. Dark patches can often be an indicator of an underlying metabolic issue. So I think slowly but surely these things start to creep in. And then if you're actually in a position of doing some measurements, you might see your weight going up, blood pressure going up, resting heart rate going up. So some changes you might start to see in your 40s.
So what would you wish that these people understood about the pain that they're seeing or the changes that they're seeing before it becomes chronic?
I think that group of individuals that are in their 40s and 50s already, it's about identification. It's about recognizing that these things are happening, not putting it down to a bad week, a bad day, bad month, but putting it down to the fact your body's changing and seeking help. Because even if we're not talking in a private setup here, we're talking within the NHS, getting your cholesterol done, your diabetes done, blood pressure check done, prostate check done, can drastically shift the needle as to then what happens in your 50s and 60s. So I would advise that. For those in their 30s that are perhaps listening to this, thinking, well, this doesn't necessarily apply to me, I'm not seeing any of those changes, it would be getting to understand your physiology, getting into the habit of tracking how much fluid am I drinking a day? What is my weight? What is my blood pressure? Because if you understand where you are with regards to those parameters now, you can monitor for changes. And it's likely that you'll see changes in your blood pressure, resting heart rate, well before you see the physical changes that you may be seeing in your 40s and 50s. So it's just about education and understanding.
Yeah. I wonder as well if people are resigned to the fact that when you're older, things are just going to change and you're just going to have to accept. I was having a chat. We were having a family dinner the other day, and then my mother-in-law is coming to stay with us, and she's 75 or something. But she's got severe hepatitis, diabetes, all this, forgetful. And then my husband was saying to the girls, almost coming. We need to. I can't remember what he was saying. He was saying something. We need to help her because she's a little bit weak, and yada yada. And then the girls were like, "Oh, but why is she weak?" And then my husband said, "Oh, because she's 75. So she's weak now." And then I looked at the girls. I was like, "No, that's not that's not why she's weak. She's weak because she hasn't exercised all her life. Because your grandfather on your Brazilian side, he's the same age and he can do whatever he wants because he exercised 3 times a week." And the girls were like, "Oh, okay." So I think education from even an early age, that was such a great example for me of, what children might start believing. And then you grow up with those beliefs. And then you get to 35, you just resign and say, well, when I'm 75, I'm just going to be old and have diabetes or whatever because my mom's had it. It's such a tough one, isn't it?
It is.
And so what do you think people are wasting their time and money on? Because there's a lot of information out there these days. There's a lot of apps that track this, track that. There's a lot of trends. There was CrossFit, which is great, by the way. But now there's what's the name? The Rocks one, High Rocks.
Yeah.
And there's all these different trends that keep coming on. And most of them, especially when it's exercise, I think they're great. It's just different alternatives that might suit different people. But what do you think people are wasting their time and money when it comes to health?
So I think you're right. There's a lot of information out there and there's a lot of different methods in which to achieve the outcomes we've discussed. I wouldn't say that there's anything that I would say is a complete waste of time. Don't go there, don't try it. But I think the issue stems from sort of what I was alluding to earlier, is a lack of understanding as to what is applicable to the individual. So if you start from a position of not knowing anything about yourself and saying, right, I'm going to go and do X, Y, and Z, you can't measure whether or not it's actually having a positive impact on you. And if you can't reliably understand that something is having a positive impact on the individual, you're less likely to stick with it because you're not seeing the benefits of it. Whereas if you start from a position of saying, right, my cholesterol is high, 6, 7, my blood pressure is high, I now need to get myself in a position where they're not high. How can I then go about doing this? Right. Okay. I need to improve my diet and I need to improve my exercise. Then look at my week. Okay. I've got 2 kids. I have a full-time job. I have care needs for an elderly parent. How do I actually fit that into my week? And start from that position. What is actually going to work with what I'm doing so that it's sustainable, so that it can be done long term? And I think if you do that, you can then say, let's reassess in 1 month's time those parameters that we started with, my blood pressure, my height, weight, maybe not blood tests at that stage because it's a bit premature, but let's see where we are in a month's time. And actually measure change, because you'll see improvements. Yeah. And if you see improvements, you go into it with more passion, more drive, you're more likely to continue it. And that's probably applicable to any of the things that you see out there. It's the ability to be able to stick with it, but you're not going to stick with it unless you're seeing results. And you can't see results if you don't have a baseline from which you started. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah. So what tips will you have for these people that are struggling to find a starting point? Say they've done some tests and they acknowledge that, or they understood, okay, my problem is X and Y, but I just don't know what steps to take now. And because like you said, not one size fits all. And then something that guy is trying, that girl fails at doing, even though they have the same problem. So is it just trying different things and then reassessing and see how it goes?
I think like most things, depends on people's circumstances really as to where the most appropriate starting point is. For example, if you had the means in which to do so, coming in to see someone like me in a private capacity, I can sit down with an individual, go through where their starting point is and kind of coach them through what might be helpful for the next few weeks. Again, if you don't have the means in which to do so, and you're going to do it within the NHS, it's still perfectly possible, but you're going to need to hone in on something. It's going to be, right, I have high cholesterol, doctor. What can I now do to try and improve my cholesterol? Now, bear in mind, if it's an NHS GP appointment, they got 10 minutes to see you, give you a plan, write up some medically, legally defensible notes, and get the next person in. So they're going to have less time. So the more information you have to be pre-armed going into that conversation, the more you're going to get out of it. But it's certainly still possible.
Yeah.
I would say seek some information. Do some reading. I mean,
Yeah.
we're so blessed these days to have an abundance of different resources in which to obtain information. And when it comes to things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all the kind of AI software, for this kind of information, I would say it's pretty accurate. You're not asking it anything obscure out of the ordinary. You're just asking some simple things. How can I lose some weight? It will give you some tried and tested methods. If you're still dubious about the information, they always provide links to where they've obtained the information from. You can go back to the parent article and have a read of it. But educating ourselves is very important, and not taking information too lightly.
Yeah. And I think you said something that I really agree with. And I think it's so important these days. It has been popular in the last few years, but I think it's becoming more and more popular, which is asking that professional advice. You said the word coaching there. I think coaching these days is huge, and more people are doing it. But what I've heard you say as well is that you can almost act like a health coach to really help them understand, okay, this is my problem, and based on the things that I do, perhaps I can try this and that, because they're going to have a much more in-depth conversation with you. And I think it's so important that people don't feel that they're alone in, I just need to figure this out on my own now. I'm going to ask ChatGPT, even though it's great. Nothing like a human touch to help people nail these things down. Okay, so if someone is 35, they're very busy, a bit stressed, they're not sleeping very well, what do you think they could try and do this week to sort of press that reset button and start again?
The first week, I think it's all about just, simplifying it. Pen and paper, a diary, charting, what do I actually do in a week? Monday to Friday, what am I actually doing? And then with that information, try and understand, okay, right, I'm removing myself from the situation. I'm going to put myself under the microscope here. What could I actually improve? Maybe that 4 p.m. coffee isn't helping my sleep. Maybe that needs to change. Maybe between the hours of 6 and 7 a.m., I could do some mindfulness. I could do some meditation, some breathing exercises. Maybe I could, do some exercise. But understand, again, it comes all back down to what I'm saying about having a baseline. Understanding where you are as an individual, understanding what the issues you are facing, because they're all different for us all. And then thinking, right, how can I improve my current week to make things better?
Yeah. So make a little journal, little diary, track for a week, maybe 2, write everything that you're doing and see if they can identify a trend there.
Because as I was saying a little earlier, whatever you do, it has to be individual to yourself. Because what I do or what you do might not work for somebody else. And that's often where I get frustrated when I go on Instagram and doom scroll, as we all do, you see all these people living these perfect lives. They're up at 5 a.m. every day, and you see an example of this and you think, well, that's what I need to attain. But it's not possible for the vast majority of people who are working. But that shouldn't put you off. It shouldn't make you think I can't still make my life healthier getting up at 7 a.m. You just have to make the changes that are amenable and suitable to your own lifestyle.
Yeah. So stop comparing. Get off your phone. I delete Instagram now.
They always say, what do they say? Comparison's a thief of joy, because what you're doing doesn't compare to what somebody else is doing, but what you've done is perfectly good and achievable for yourself.
Yeah. So what does life look like in 10, 20 years for someone who's perhaps in their 40s and who doesn't take their health seriously?
I think a lot of it depends on luck, ethically. You could live a very unhealthy lifestyle and you could get to 80 or 90 and be perfectly fine. You could lead a very, very healthy lifestyle and get to 80 or 90 and be, or not even get to 80 or 90, die of something premature. So I would say it's almost not about the end result. We're all doing this because we want to live longer. But I would say it's more about the quality of life that you enjoy during that period of time. Because if you're doing all the right things, eating the right things, sleeping well, and doing exercise, nobody can guarantee you're going to live to 90. You sadly might still get cancer and die young. But the time in which you're healthy is most certainly going to be better than the individual who's leading a sedentary life, not eating healthy, vibrant foods, not sleeping well. So I would say it's more about the quality than the quantity, because the rest of it, none of us can guarantee.
No. So ensuring you have a good journey.
Yeah, we all have a fixed period of time, whatever that is. It's about making the most out of whatever that time period is and enjoying it to the very best that we all can. And not being too harsh on ourselves, because mental health plays a very important part in that as well.
Yeah. So that's one more thing to consider. So what about you? What do you do yourself to stay healthy and ahead of all this? And also, what do you struggle with?
So my own journey into this preventative field was through my own kind of illness. I, for a long time, suffered with psoriasis, really disabling psoriasis of my hands, to the point I'd have massive, deep fissures. If I showed you the pictures, it'd put you off for lunch. And I was actually formerly an anaesthetist before I became a GP, and I could no longer do surgical procedures because I couldn't wash my hands and massive cuts. I went through Western approaches to Western medicine. It was Medicate, steroids. Steroids have side effects. I didn't get better. I went for an Eastern approach. Take this, take that, take this, take that. And that didn't get me any results. So I was neither any further forward with the two. I'd read a book by a longevity consultant, and then it talked about understanding yourself, which is where I come back to this baseline. So I looked at my life, understood, well, the skin is the largest organ in the body. It's probably reflecting some sort of imbalance within myself, which, to be fair, is what the Eastern approach to medicine was saying. He's saying you've got a balance issue here somewhere. So I went through and I understood, the kind of binge drinking I'm enjoying on the weekends is probably not doing me any favors. I was doing a lot of exercise, perhaps just not in the right way. The lack of fruit and veg, the processed foods that we all consume as part of our lives, and the poor sleep as a result. So I looked at my life, wrote all this down, looked at what can I improve. I must stress I didn't change all of those things at the same time. I changed them one by one, saw some improvements, started changing more and more. And my hands are great. It went away completely. It's not completely gone. If I go away for 2 weeks on holiday and I enjoy a less strict lifestyle, because we're not robots, it will come back to a certain extent. But it reverses when I come home, and it's shown me the effect that happens from understanding oneself and making changes. So I try and practice what I preach to a certain extent, but it changed my life. So I think that's where I derive my passion for it from.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. That's great. So I know you you cycle a lot. What else you do to stay? You're obviously eating well now, but any other exercise that you do that you recommend?
So my background is triathlon. I'm fortunate enough to have done a couple of Ironmans, and I now moved more onto cycling because it allows more time, because it's just one discipline, and I do some running with my daughter at the weekends. But I think the exercise changes that I've noticed, because I've not far off 40 now. If you just go route one with your primary sport all the time, as you get older and you don't do any strength work, you get injured an awful lot. So I've introduced twice a week, just at home, strength session, kind of full body, some squats, some lunges, some lifts, just to get some strength work in, because that's given me a more stable base, and it's decreased the tendency for myself to get injured. So I would say that's something I've incorporated, which, as we were talking to earlier, is a key part of preventative medicine, is doing some strength work.
Brilliant. And then with food, what are you strict with?
They always say you should eat the rainbow. When you eat fruits, you should it should be colourful and vibrant, and a good mix of nuts and seeds and all things good. So at home, that's what we try and do. We try and buy organic where possible. I mean, food prices do impact whether that's something that everyone can afford to do, but definitely try and buy fresh fruit, vegetable, limit the quantity of processed foods. By processed, the way I interpret it is, if I look at the back of something, ingredients list, and I don't know what's in it, that for me means I probably shouldn't be having it. So just eating kind of more fresh foods, cutting out all kind of zero sugar carbonated drinks. Again, there's a lot of evidence now that there's gut disruptors in there that can do a lot of harm to your overall gut functioning. So switch them with sparkling water with natural flavorings. So big fan of that. So yeah, my take home from a dietary perspective would be, whatever your financial circumstances would be, try and eat fresh and try and have lots of colors on the plate. I think is a good starting point.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they'll replace as well carbonated drinks with juice.
Yeah.
Either fresh juice or juice concentrated. What's your take on those?
So I think it's a sliding scale, isn't it? If somebody's come from drinking full-fat Coke to having juice, natural juice, you'd have to say, well done. That's a positive change that you've made in your life. Great, let's encourage it. But it's probably not the place that you want to finish on that scale. You want to continue moving down the scale. So I think it's all about making improvements and celebrating those improvements. If you've switched from full-fat Coke to zero, great, let's celebrate that. You've made an improvement, but let's not make that the final destination. Let's continue moving down.
Yeah. And I think that's probably another really important step on anyone who's in this journey of self-improvement and prevention and whatever they want to call it, is celebrating the small wins that you achieve. So it could be that I always do this at the end of the week. What went well this week, and what are my wins of the week?
Yeah.
And I always try to do that with my team. And you can do that at work. You could do that at home. You could do that with your personal goals. So if my goal is final destination, I want it to be that. What have I achieved this week that supports that? And just celebrate those wins.
Celebrate the small wins. And also appreciate that if you go out for dinner or you go on holiday, have a good time. I mean, that's what life is there for living. It's not there for having strictness the entirety of the time. But if you've built up a good reserve, you can then go and enjoy yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, that's brilliant. Vik, thank you so much for participating on the podcast today. And I really appreciate you sharing your personal experience as well. That's really inspiring. For anyone listening, if you want to get in touch with Vik, we will have all details from Vik and Like a Health down in the description. And if you have any other comments as well, please write down the comments. Vik, thanks again so much for participating.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to come on and speak with you. And I'd be happy to answer anyone's questions should they have any.
Super. And I'm sure we'll have you as a guest again in the future. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all next time.